If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Hi everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the Kristin Smart trial. We still have ongoing motions and hearings, etc. in Salinas, California at the Monterey County Courthouse. As we approach Paul's sentencing, scheduled for March 10th, 2023, which will be Friday, coming up here, our local news has released info regarding some of the evidence presented in Kristin's murder trial has been released. And since production is very time-consuming, I'm going to try something new here. We'll see how it goes. This episode gets juicy towards the second half, so stick around for the second half. It starts out slow, but it gets better, trust me. I had to make time for this episode because some of this stuff is quite interesting. And even though our life is pretty nutso lately, I wanted to make sure that I got this information to you all as soon as possible. And much of the evidence won't be released to the media and the public until after Paul is sentenced. But per our local news, KSBY, on March 6, 2023, they said that the Monterey County Superior Court surprisingly made some of the evidence available earlier than expected. One item was Paul's interview with Paul, of course, and Rio Grande Police Department. That interview was from June 19th, 1996. In the interview with William Hanley and Larry Hobson, who are both SLO County DA investigators, they questioned young Paul Flores. And I'm going to go ahead and go over some of the questions that were released here. The total video is 48 minutes. Of course, we're just going to touch on a little bit of it. Paul, is there anything else that you told us that you didn't think it was a big deal? Hobson asks. Paul responded, no. It's not a big deal if you haven't told us the truth, Hobson added. Paul added another no response. How do we know that? Hobson questioned. Take my word for it, I guess, Paul said. In that conversation, Paul was questioned many times about how he got his black eye. Why was it so hard for you to tell us that you got that black eye hitting the steering wheel? Hobson asked. It didn't really matter, Paul said. What do you mean it didn't matter? Hobson questioned. It was days later, Paul said. If it didn't matter, then why did you lie about it? Why does it matter if I leave out little details? Paul responded. In the 48-minute video, one of the many items just released by the county courthouse following Paul and Ruben's months-long trial, you're not acknowledging any of this ever happened, and yet all these other people are telling us it did happen, Hobson said in the recorded interview. I guess I had a blackout that time, but I remember her walking away, though, Paul said. The trial evidence also includes photos of Kristin Smart's belongings found in her dorm, a handwritten letter from her mother, Denise, written to her in 1996, and also dirt samples taken from Ruben's home on White Court in Arroyo Grande. There was also a wiretap recording of a phone call between Paul and his mother, Susan, recorded on January 26, 2020. It was played in court during the trial, but due to limitations by the judge, only still photography was allowed, meaning only those in the courtroom could hear the recording firsthand. The other things I need you to do is to start listening to the podcast. I need you to listen to everything they say so we could punch holes in it. Wherever we can punch holes, Susan said to Paul. Maybe we can't. You're the one that can tell me. I personally have mixed feelings about that call between Susan and Paul. I have to admit it didn't seem as nefarious to me as it does to some. Punching holes could be legit holes depending on who's talking. And I'm not defending anyone here, trust me. But I do try to look at this stuff objectively. I 100% feel Paul's guilty of Kristin's murder and so much more. But that particular bit of evidence wouldn't have made much of an impression on me, and I wonder how much it affected the jurors or did not affect the jurors. There was also an audio recording from May 19th, 2021, when SLO County Sheriff's Detective Clint Cole collected DNA samples from Reuben, Susan, and her boyfriend Mike. Well, they haven't committed no felonies. I mean, I'm the only one. I've been arrested, Reuben said. That was a quote. The initial interview with Cal Poly police investigator Mike Kennedy and Robert Cudworth, which took place on May 30th, 1996, was also made available. Let's go over some of the interview and what was released and how it was covered in the actual trial. Paul was asked if he remembered any of the conversation with Kristin as they were walking up the hill. Paul said he only remembered that Kristin was freezing. The police asked if there was any talk of, getting together. And Paul said there was no talk of that at all. The newly released evidence also included photos of the Crandall Way home where the off-campus party took place, including a map outlining the walk back to campus that night. By the way, we have Kristin's last walk on our playlist if you want to get an idea of what the route was like. We walked it ourselves. So I'll see you all Friday, March 10th, 2023 for Paul's sentencing. He'll be getting anywhere from 25 to life. And hopefully we're going to hear Judge O'Keefe also deny all of Paul's motions. Of course, appeals are still quite possible, but one thing at a time. For now, Paul the Monster remains locked behind bars where he belongs. And you all know how I scour the news for Kristin's updates, etc. And we learned during the trial how varying news sources can be. So I find the local ones are the ones that are most likely accurate. And the major media outlets suck, quite frankly, at real news, in my opinion. By the way, my statement has nothing to do with politics. Fake news is real. The next morning, March 7th, 2023, Cal Coast News, one of my local sources, had some very interesting details regarding District Attorney Chris Pavrell's legal response to Robert Sanger's motions for new trial. Get your popcorn, everybody. I did get some satisfaction at this clapback that you're going to hear. And Sanger, as you know, is not my favorite person. And I feel like his legal skills are not impressive, especially during this particular legal process. And I'm not just throwing shade because I think Paul's guilty or that I'm super satisfied with the verdict, which means Sanger failed, basically. I wouldn't want Sanger to represent me, that's for sure. Just saying. Side note. Actually, this is a detour. It's been a while. I'm going to take you on a full-on detour. You remember Funky Baloo, the local attorney who's contributed commentary throughout the trial, and I've used some of his commentary in my episodes? Well, he is now defending a man in a most unusual case. I'm just going to touch on it. So this man crashed his car in slow, and he hit several things, including crashing right through the bridge railing. And days later, someone who was walking by found a dead dog below in the creek bed. Come to find out, that dog matched the description of a missing local couple that had not showed up to a family event out of town, so they reported missing. So then authorities went back to search where the dog was found, and they found the couple deceased under some bushes in the creek bed. And it took a few months before any arrests were made. We learned that night there was no sobriety test performed. And the prosecution is now saying alcohol was part of the reason for the crash, as well as speed and other factors. And one big question is, did the defendant know he hit anyone? 2 adults and their dog? I don't know their injuries, but it's haunting to think they could have been saved or that they could have suffered for days down in that creek bed until they were found. The prosecution's attorney actually had a medical emergency during the hearing and he collapsed in the courtroom. So, a little bit of extra there. So, I digress. Sorry about that. So, let's get back to Kristin's case. Are you ready for the stinging response? Here we go. The slow DA accuses Sanger of, quote, sanctionable offenses, end quote. According to an opposition filed March 3rd, 2023, we all know this is Sanger's 10th attempt to dismiss the case. In his latest motion, Sanger accuses prosecutor Chris Prevel of prejudicial misconduct and violating a court order. The prosecution has fired back in his detailed opposition, and it's so good. He states, quote, the court has not erred, and the prosecutor has not committed prejudicial misconduct, and the motion for the new trial should be denied, end quote. Sanger accuses the prosecution of mischaracterizing the burden of proof by asking jurors to choose if the case was based on a conspiracy or if Paul killed Kristin. Sanger accused podcaster Chris Lambert and others of spreading conspiracy theories. The prosecution refuted all of these claims. Sanger's motion claims Chris Prevel violated a court order regarding the photo of one of the does with a ball gag in her mouth. The picture was only to be shown to show Paul had the device. The DA asked the jury, quote, did it look like that woman was having fun, end quote. The prosecution explained that one needs the full context regarding the statement. Here we go. Remember all the silly dog-related questions by the defense? We were all laughing. It was so stupid. Well, here we learn even more. And it's even more ridiculous than we all thought. In the court filing, the prosecution calls out the conspiracy theory accusation and highlights some of the dog testimony. He refers to when Sanger asked one of the dog handlers if they spoke dog. Chris understood the question now, and he says it was asked to prove the dogs were all part of the conspiracy, for the same reason Sanger asked if the dogs were friends, and somehow the prosecution was in on all this. Back in 1996, when the dogs were speaking to their handlers, and the dogs were speaking to each other, and everybody was being friends, the prosecutor was actually a freshman in high school at the time. It's all absurd. Even though conspiracy theories are fun, the prosecution further explains the context. No one was having fun because it's not a fun case. As far as the repeated claims of prosecutor misconduct and misrepresentation, the arguments were made by both sides. He said, quote, claims of prosecutorial misconduct should be used as a shield to ensure the right of a defendant to a fair trial. Chris Prevel goes on to say that Sanger's baseless allegations follow a pattern that has included the repeated denigration of counsel documented in the record, including in the defense's closing argument. We're all anxiously waiting for Friday, March 10th, 2023. It's coming up quick when the judge will rule on the motions and hopefully sentence Paul once and for all. Hashtag find Kristin Smart.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just be love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for
Bring
watching.
my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I still